Greetings! It is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! It is time to continue my expose on the history of Magic the Gathering, where I go set by set, product release by product release, explaining everything about them that you will need to know to understand the overall history and the lore of Magic the Gathering. Alright, let's start with the final set in the Ravnica block, Descent. It was released on May 5th of 2006, and it had 180 cards. This was 15 more cards than was in a standard set during this time, standard small set. And the reason behind this was the reintroduction of split cards. Now, there wasn't 15 of them, of course, but there was enough of them that they did have this increase in cards to account for the existence of these split cards during this time period. So, the mechanics of this set, of course, were guilds, hybrid mana, multicolored cards, and the split cards I mentioned. The keywords were forecast, hellbent, and of course, graph. Now, its symbol was basically a variation of the wrought iron design that we had seen within Guild Pack. It was supposed to represent the disintegration of the Guild Pack, so it's basically becoming less there, disintegrating more. It still has the three branches representing the three guilds that were talked about, which were shown in this set. So it did continue the major themes that had been across the entire block of multicolor, but it did introduce us, as I said, to three new guilds. Now, it was sold in 15 card booster packs, 3 pre-constructed decks, and of course a fat pack. The theme deck and the fat pack had Pro Tour cards in them, and the pre-release was on April 22nd and 23rd, and the pre-release card was an Avatar of Discord, a foil alternate art version of it. It did have a release card with Azorius Guildmage, and it did have a novel named after the same name as the set that came out along with it. The storyline brings us to the Nephilim destroying the city, creating chaos across it, bringing massive amounts of devastation, all which seems to have some kind of hand in it, actually, some kind of manipulation, where it's only destroying certain areas. In the meantime, we have Kos, who we talked about, of course, back in the first set in this block, and the storyline of it. He's dead now, but he can't rest. He's a spirit, and he's got to save Ravnica once again. This time he does it by basically destroying the Guild Pack. He arrests Sadok, the lord, the leader of House Demir, and brings that house to light, when the Guild Pack was basically keeping them in the shadows. So now everybody knows about them, the Guild Pack is dissolving, and well, Ravnica's changing. Now the guilds that were introduced here were first the Azorius Senate. They are a blue-white guild, and their special ability was Forecast. How it worked is, if I had a card with Forecast in my hand during my upkeep, and only once a turn during my upkeep, I may reveal that card from my hand as part of an activated ability of that card. I basically pay a Forecast cost, and I have a special ability for revealing this. So this is an activated ability. I'm not technically casting a spell. I'm paying the mana cost of the Forecast of this card, revealing it, having the effect, it returns to my hand. This is a variation on the buyback, which we had seen in previously earlier sets, but this is an activated ability instead. So it is harder to counter than normal, because you're technically not casting a spell. You're activating an ability, revealing it from your hand, calling it a day. Now, there was also, of course, the Simic Combine. It is the green-blue guild. Now, their special ability was Graft. When a creature with Graft would enter the battlefield, it would enter the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to its Graft value. Then, when another creature would enter the battlefield, this creature with Graft could move one of its +1/+1 counters from it to another creature. Then it usually would have some kind of ability based upon +1/+1 counters being on certain creatures, and then it would be able to activate them. But effectively, what it would do is, comes to play with +1/+1 counters, you can spread them out as you need then, as you have more creatures enter the battlefield. You can move them over to those. Now, the last guild introduced was, of course, the Cult of Rakdos, which was the red-black guild. They had the special ability of Hellbent. This was just a triggered ability. Effectively, when I had no cards in my hand is empty, well, Hellbent activates. And then something activates on this creature. Either it gets a bonus, it does something else. Or it could be a spell with Hellbent that if you have no hand, it activates with an extra special ability. It's just based on the fact that you have no hand. Now, as I said, it did introduce split cards. It actually had 10 split cards that it introduced here with combinations of guilds between the two of them. So these were multicolored split cards. Now, we also did an expansion of protection. We saw the introduction of protection from multicolor and protection from monocolor, both within this set. Now, it did continue the mega cycles that we had seen from Ravnica, which I talked about when I talked about that set. And so I'm not going to go into all those mega cycles, but they did continue, and they're based around the guilds, of course. But it had 3 cycles of their own. First off, it had a cycle of Eidolons. These were 2/2 spirits that you could sacrifice for an effect. But when a certain type of card was put into play or played, you could turn that Eidolon from your graveyard to your hand. So Eidolons were creatures you could put out, sacrifice, and fairly easily get back to use again. There was also uncommon split cards. This cycle basically was centered around a single type of mana, and then it had the 2 guilds that had allied mana to that mana. So for example, if it was green, it would have white, and it would have red as the 2 guilds that were associated, that they had the 2 cards from. Now, there was also rare split cards. This was similar to the last one, except it was centered around a single mana, and then it would have the enemy color manas to each side that would figure out which guilds were associated. So going from the same example of the green, we would have black and we would have blue on the 2 sides of it for the green one. Now, we did have 2 mirror pairs, including the skeeves, the Vision Skeeve and the Delirium Skeeve. We had 3 reprinted cards, including Seal of Doom. Now, the pre-constructed decks were, of course, a white-blue called Azorius Ascendant, a green-blue called Simic Mutology, and a red-black called Rakdos Bloodsport. Alright, let's talk about some of the cards from this set. Let's start, of course, with Demon Fire. This spell does X damage to target creature or player. If a creature that was dealt damage with Demon Fire would die this turn, exile instead, and has a Hellbent effect that if you have no cards in hand, then this spell can't be countered, and the damage it deals cannot be prevented. There was the split card, Research and Development. Research allows you to take 4 cards from outside of the game and shuffle them into your library. Effectively, for this game, I can add 4 cards in that, hey, maybe these are 4 cards that will help with the specific enemy I'm fighting. Development had you put a 3/1 red elemental creature token into the battlefield. If a opponent chose instead to have you draw a card, you do that instead. So effectively, I either get a elemental or a card. It's up to one of my opponents to choose that. I actually then repeat this process 2 more times to either get a total of 3 tokens, 3 cards, or some kind of combination of the 2 of those. The Simic Sky Swallower was a 6/6 flying trample shroud. A relatively just really big, really good creature. Spell Snare allows you to counter a spell with a converted mana cost of 2. So it was oddly specific, but it was 1 mana for a counter. Transguild Courier was an artifact creature. That was every color mana. This was the first artifact creature, first artifact to have color, and it was also the first artifact to have all 5 colors. Trigon Predator was a flying creature that when it deals combat damage to a player, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment that player controls. Vagian Intuition allows you to choose a type of card. This is like any type of card, artifact, land, enchantment, etc., creature. Just choose a type of card. Then you reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put any cards of that type into your hand. Put the rest into your graveyard. You just choose a type of card, and you might get them if you had the right intuition. The Rakdos Augur Mage was a 3/2 first strike that had the ability tap. You reveal your hand. An opponent chooses a card from that, you discard it. Then your opponent reveals their hand, you choose a card from that, and they discard that. So if you don't have anything you really care about in your hand, you can reveal it, you get rid of something, but then you have your opponent get rid of something too. So it's a trade-off. There's the Avatar of Discord, a 5/2 flyer that when it enters the battlefield, you must discard 2 cards or sacrifice it. So it's a pretty big one for cheap, but you do have to discard cards, but for Hellbent. The Azorius Aether Mage. When a permanent would be returned to your hand, you may pay 1, and if you do, you can draw a card. The Azorius Guild Mage. For 2 colors and a white, you can tap target creature. For 2 colors and a blue, you can counter target activated ability. Hey, this is a way to counter out that forecast we talked about. You could use the Guild Mage here, the Azorius Guild Mage, or you could just counter an activated ability. It's a major way of doing that. Biomatic Mastery. Draw a card for each creature target player controls. Then, draw a card for each creature another target player controls. So you choose 2 players, maybe even yourself, and you draw a lot of cards. Celestial Ascendant. It is a flying creature that whenever you play an enchantment spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Crime and Punishment. Crime. Put a creature or enchantment from target opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Punishment. Destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with a converted mana cost of X. Cytoplasm Manipulator. It has Graft 2, but for a blue and a tap, gain control of target creature with a +1/+1 counter on it, as long as you control Cytoplasmic Manipulator. So if I have this creature out, I can use it to tap, steal things. It has Graft, so I can spread out some +1/+1 counters on things I want to steal when they come into battlefield. Or if I'm just using a Graft deck, I could also spread them out to steal more creatures. Supply and Demand. Another split card. Supply. You create X 1/1 green sapling tokens. That's it. Demand. You search your library for a multicolored spell, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Shuffle your library afterwards. Elemental Resonance. It's an enchant permanent. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you add mana to your mana pool equal to the mana cost of the permanent you've enchanted. So whatever its mana is, color or not color, you get that much mana to your mana pool each of your pre-combat main phases. Evolution Vat. For 3 mana, tap the target creature. This creature gets a +1/+1 counter on it, and until end of turn it gains the ability 2 colorless, 1 blue, 1 green, double the amount of +1/+1 counters on this creature. So effectively, I put a +1/+1 counter on something, and then until end of turn, I can keep paying mana to double it. Experiment Crash. It has the activated abilities of each creature with a +1/+1 counter on it. So everything that has +1/+1 counters, it has all those activated abilities. And for just tapping it, +1/+1 counter on target creature. So Experiment Craft can put +1/+1 counters very easily on creatures that you want the activated abilities of. Ghost Quarter. You tap it for a colorless, or you tap and sacrifice it to destroy target land. Its controller can search their library for a basic land and put it into the battlefield, then shuffle their library afterwards. Effectively, you can get rid of non-basic lands, but the opponent gets a basic land to replace it. It's still pretty good. Grand Arbiter Augustine IV. Your white spells cost 1 colorless less to play. Your blue spells cost 1 colorless to play. Your opponent's spells cost 1 more colorless to play. So all your stuff is cheaper, all your opponent's stuff is more expensive. Leaf Drake Roost. It's an enchant land, and it has a green, a blue tap, basically tapping the land, to put a 2/2 green-blue Drake token into the battlefield with flying. Loaming Shaman. When it enters the battlefield, target player may shuffle any number of cards from their graveyard into their library. And this works on any player, not just you. Reign of Gore. If a spell or ability would cause its controller to gain life, instead they lose that much life. Lisata, the Blood Witch. For 2, you could sacrifice a creature. Lisata does 2 damage to target creature or player if that creature that you sacrificed was red, and you're able to draw a card if that creature was black. Momar Zig, Simic Visionary. If you would play a green spell, you may search your library for a creature card, reveal it, and put it on the top of your library. If the spell you cast was blue, you may reveal the top card of your library, and if it's a creature card, you put it into your hand. So if you play Brew Green spell, you search your library for a creature card and put it in your hand, effectively. Muse Vessel. 3, tap. Target player removes a card from their hand from the game. You may only play this as a sorcery. For 1, you may choose a card removed from the game with Muse Vessel. You may play this card this turn. No Vision, the Heart of Progress. You can tap it for a colorless, or for a green and a blue, you may put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that came into play this turn. Omniborn. For tapping it, target creature becomes a 3/3 frog until end of turn. Pill of the Perunes. Tap it to add any color mana to your mana pool, but you can only spend this mana to play multicolored spells. Proper burial. When a creature you control dies, you gain life equal to its toughness. So if you're playing a deck that has a lot of death involved in it, or sacrifice, like a black-white one, proper burial works very well. Protein Hawk. When Protein Hawk dies, you may search your library for any number of creatures with a total converted mana cost of 6 or less. So Protein Hawk dies, you get a bunch of creatures, they get put into play. So total number of converted mana cost creatures 6 or less into play. Ratcatcher. It's a fear. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library for a rat card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Really great for a rat deck. Stalking Vengeance. Whenever another creature you control dies, it deals damage equal to its power to target player. Tidespout Tyrant. It's a flying creature that whenever you would cast a spell, you may return target permanent to its owner's hand. Wakestone Gargoyle. It's a defender with flying that for 1 colorless, 1 white, target creature with defender can attack as though it did not have defender this turn. Basically, this is for your wall decks that you want them to attack with. Guess what? We just had an option for it with the Wakestone Gargoyle. And finally, Wrecking Ball. Destroy target creature or land. It's as simple as that. But that's it for today. I finished off the Ravnica block with Dissension. This is the final set in the block, and we saw the reintroduction of split cards, a popular card type, an interesting card type that we haven't seen for a long time. Again, we continued everything we've seen throughout this block, making sure that this glue fits between them. Multicolored cards, the guilds, the hybrid mana. We see them all connecting quite well, and everything makes sense in the themes of it. We have seen the 10 guilds now. And we've been introduced to this interesting world with an interesting history and an even storyline that matches what's going on. We've also seen other things. The expansion of protection to monocolor and multicolor. We saw an artifact creature, an artifact in general, that was colored. Transguild Courier was all 5 colors now, grant you, but it was a colored artifact. The first of its kind, and would pave the way for more to come. We have seen more colored artifacts since then. This was the beginning of changes and introductions of interesting things. All the abilities that we had here for the creatures were excellent abilities. Hellbent was interesting. No cards in hand, great abilities. Graft, where we manipulate +1/+1 counters for abilities. And Forecast, where we have an activated ability of something from our hand. We're activating an ability from somewhere else other than in play. All of this meant that this block, was both powerful and interesting at the same time. It wasn't so powerful to overwhelm everybody that people are like, oh my gosh. It was just powerful enough and just good enough. And it is one of the reasons that it was a reinvigoration to Magic. We saw a great reinvigoration of the entire sets with Mirrodin, with the birth of modern Magic. But we saw a fall-off during Kamigawa. But Ravnica kept it going. Ravnica showed that just one mistake is not something to throw away Magic to. And though most of the sets beyond here for some time didn't have the same feeling, the same oomph, really as Ravnica, really as Mirrodin, we did see greatness evolving within Magic, and this was a turning point. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows support for the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon. Link to the description below. There's some great rewards there. It helps to grow and improve the channel. If you want to see some other great Magic the Gathering content, I can recommend my Friends of the Multiverse, Card Bazaar, They Said We Said, and Tasty Snackies. They do great Magic the Gathering content. I can always recommend them. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.